Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. We're going to start the session now on Address Point Roadmap, or as the presentation says, SSAP Roadmap. So our presenter this morning is Justin Smith. Justin's the GIS manager for Cumberland County, Pennsylvania, and he is very, very involved in the address point collaboration for the Next Generation 911 effort across Pennsylvania. So, Justin, it's all yours.
Thank you. Okay, so start off with what is SSAP? So SSAP stands for Site Structure Address Point. It is the acronym we use for the data layer that we use for Next Gen 911. So similar for like road center line, we call that RCL. Okay. Oh, that's right. Need to use this. Okay, so I am a member of the Pennsylvania Geo Board. The Geo Board is an advisory board. So we have worked on a PA Base Map 2030 initiative, trying to guide interagency, intergovernmental work for development, ownership, funding, and sharing of data layers. And you can see the data layers there in the bottom right. Almost every one of these has a dedicated working group, all volunteers throughout county, state, private organizations working towards creating these data layers for just making them more accurate, making them more authoritative, making them more available, improving them. So today we're going to be talking about addresses specifically. So what is an address point? So up at the very top here of the screen, you can see it's a little shaded, but the banner here showing the Conagwinnett River running through, and you see some roads and some parcels, and then you see the points. Those are address points. And an address point describes the location. And how do we describe location? We describe location with addresses. It's the common way we describe and communicate location. 123 Main Street, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, zip code, municipality, state, country. Those identifying attributes are how we describe addresses, and those are inside of the data set. So those are the attributes, and then we have the points. So I'm not going to go into every different way the address points are used, but there's a lot of uses. I don't have that much time to talk about every use of address points. And one of the real benefits in the last 5-10 years has been the move towards standardization. Right? We have standards that we're working towards. It's not just a free-for-all of everybody creating their own data set. We have a NINA data model, right? If you were upstairs at Christian's presentation just before this, he talked about the NINA data model, creating that format for how we're submitting keeping our information. We also have legislation that says that we got to work together, right? We have 67 counties, and we need to be working all towards the same goal here. And that goal is Next Gen 911. So we have this Pennsylvania Next Gen 911 data model. Standards are based on NINA. That really helps us because we know what we're working towards. You can help your neighbor because you're both working in the same data set. So it's very good for standardization. I'm going to be talking about a lot of different kinds of address point layers. And I like to think of them as an ecosystem. So we have our county GIS data, our county address point layer that counties have been maintaining for the last decade or two to work in their 911 system. And now we're trying to leverage that same data set from county 911 systems into a statewide system for next generation 911. And then hopefully taking that data and pushing it out to the public so the public can then use our address point layer. So hopefully it's the same data throughout, but it's really 3 distinct layers doing 3 different jobs, but it should be all the same data. So how does an address start? In Pennsylvania, the law says that a municipality is in charge of assigning an address, but in many cases, a county has assumed that responsibility. So on this map, you can see that in red, those are all the counties that have a centralized addressing with no municipal addressing. And then in the yellow is where there's only municipal addressing, no county addressing. And then in the green and blue, those are counties, municipalities. There's a mix of county-based the county's responsible for addressing or the municipality's responsible for addressing. There's a mix in those counties. So the addressing authority needs to communicate with the county. The county then maintains those addresses, and those addresses are then populated into the county 911 system. So that upstairs, Christian was talking about the PSAP, the Public Safety Answering Point. It's the 911 center. So the 911 center can know where you're calling from, right? You call in, say, I'm at 123 Main Street. Where's 123 Main Street? They have a map right there in the 911 center, populated with address points. They can see where it is. Okay, this is sort of the workflow that we're talking about. We're taking the county GIS department is loading those address points into the county 911 system, right? So we have this functional solution. A functional solution is the computer-aided dispatch system, the 911 CAD system. That stands for computer-aided dispatch. And you have call takers, you have dispatchers in that 911 center that are looking at this computer-aided dispatch system with the GIS map right there on the screen. They can see where these addresses are. These address points are loaded into the CAD system to serve a functional purpose of mapping where that call is, locating that call, and recommending services based on that location. You know, what's the closest, what ambulance should we send? What fire truck should we send? And then those address points are loaded into that computer-aided dispatch system based on the standard of that vendor who's created that 911 system. So we have Hexagon, we have Tyler Technologies. I think there's like 5 or 6 different CAD vendors throughout the state that these 911 centers use, and counties need to customize almost their address points to work in those computer-aided dispatch systems. So the next step is taking the data from all these counties and aggregating it. We'll talk about an ETL, an extract, transformation, and load process for getting that data into a single data set. So we're going to talk about taking 67 county address point data sets, making them to a single statewide layer. And again, we see the flow of address point information from the county GIS department into this statewide aggregation. The Data Hub is a solution that PEMA has purchased for NextGen 911. The Geocom Data Hub solution, it's a commercial solution where counties can submit their data and it's QC'd and aggregated into a statewide data set that meets into the NINA data model standard. Right, so we worked on a functional service scope. PIMA developed a strategic plan with the county GIS partners. We worked on a gap analysis. The gap analysis is very important because we have this GIS data, these address points that are already serving a role in the 911 computer aided dispatch system. Now we need them to work in the next-gen 911 system. What's the functional gap between those two systems, right? What does the data do here that can work in the new system, and what doesn't the data do the new system needs to have it do? So what kind of remediation work do we need to do to get that data up to the next functional standard? We want to use this single address point layer for multiple solutions. So this is how this is a screenshot right from Geocom and their data hub of the steps in which they're working with the data and how the data is processed. I'm not going to talk about that too much. Okay. So we have the address point data in the counties, aggregating it through the data hub, and then using that statewide data set to perform the functional work of geospatial call routing in the next-gen 911 system. If you're upstairs, Christian talked about the current the older E911 system that didn't utilize GIS. Now the new system is utilizing GIS, the next-gen 911 system. And we've developed best practices to define what that data needs to look like. We're talking about a lot of data, a lot of addresses throughout the state. And when you call 911, you want your phone call to be going right to the person that it needs to go to. It's fast. It's second. And the data needs to be extremely accurate, extremely available, current, and there's a lot of things that go into that. There's a lot of work. So we need to define how all the players in this environment and what their roles and responsibilities are, so we're getting a consistent product. This is what our address point layer looks like currently. Downloaded this a couple days ago from the Data Hub. We have 64 out of 67 counties, 5.6 million points. So this is, your 123 Main Street, but also your 123 Main Street Apartment A, your 123 Main Street Apartment B. That's kind of the level of accuracy that we're trying to achieve with this address point data set. We're shooting for 2024 to have this data set complete. Every 2 weeks or a month, we're updating. That's the update schedule for the counties to submit the data into the Data Hub for aggregation and quality control. There's limited availability for this data at the moment. You have to have access into the Data Hub. You have to have 911 credentials, basically, to access the Data Hub to submit this data and to submit your county data and grab the statewide data set out of the system. So with that limited availability, this data set is for next-gen 911. That's what it was designed for. That's what it's meant for. That's who has access to this data set currently. It's publicly sharing this data set is advantageous. So there's nothing in this data set that is personal information, right? There's no name of the person who lives at an address in this data set. So it's not much different than going onto a website and typing in an address and looking it up. It's the same sort of thing as going to Google or something like that to look up an address. It's the same type of information, except this is 911 information that's very accurate. So one of the things that was talked about a long time ago was if you're looking at your cell phone and you have your cell phone on you and your cell phone tells you, hey, you're at 123 Main Street, That's what your cell phone's telling you. You might be somewhere, you're not familiar with it, but that's what your cell phone's telling you. You want the person answering your 911 call to be seeing the same map, right? So that sort of interoperability is what we're working towards. A single base map. So, we're in discussion with how we taking this statewide aggregated data set and getting it out to a public address point layer. Right now, the Department of Transportation hosts a national address database. You can go to this website, free to download. There's 6 counties in Pennsylvania that participate. I think I looked at this, December 22, so that's the last time I looked at this. There might be more, but how do we get that statewide data set that we just looked at, this, into here to the public's hands? That's where we're at now. That's the challenge. That's the sort of the challenge that we're at now is how does that work? Getting, some lawyers to sign off on that, basically. Okay, so I took a look at this and looked at the elements of how do we get from county data to a statewide aggregated data set. It starts with communication, talking with each other, working with each other, working with that state agency, having a state agency committed to be a champion. PEMA's been committed to making this next gen 911 system work. It's extremely helpful to have their commitment and funding dollars to throw at this. We talked about the NENA standards. We have a strategic plan that's been updated. We're working on a 3rd version of a strategic plan. Really helps us to collaborate and coordinate exactly what efforts we're going to be working on. We have a best practice document. We're working on another version of that. Those functional services, right? What is the data designed to do? The data designed to do right now is designed for 911 purposes. What else can the data do? What else are we going to use it for? Are we going to use it for locating voters? Are we going to use it for, what else do you think an address point set can be used for? There's many uses, but what was the data designed to do, right? We need to think about those possible limitations. We need to take ownership of the process. And I think there's been some good momentum in actually taking ownership of the process and saying, this is our data, we're going to make sure it's right, we're going to work on this. We have that ETL solution developed. We're accepting that this is the authoritative data set. We can point to this and say, this is our authoritative data set. This is what we want to use. We've accepted that this is the data set we're going to work on and commit to. And then we're working on distributing it to the public. And I'd like to point out that there are other uses of address point data other than Next-Gen 911, which I just mentioned that. But we need to leverage the existing structure and the lessons learned of the processes that we've just talked about, right? These processes. We need to leverage that for using address points in other ways. And then the accomplishments that we've seen with the address point layer can be leveraged for other county authored data sets, right? The counties have parcel data. Parcel data is the most valuable data set that the government can produce, that people want to see. People want to see that parcel information. How do we get that out? Well, let's use the lessons we've learned from generating this address point data set to leveraging that with other data that we need to aggregate and then publish. Yep, I'm done.
Any questions for Justin?
Hi. I came in a little late. Anyway, I work with a lot of data like this in reference to locating. I do a lot of field work for PennDOT planning partners, northeastern Pennsylvania. And a lot of times the public data that's collected compared to the private data is somewhat different. Is there And you talked about a single base map. Are we going to be using the private sector data as well as the public sector data for a single base map, or is it just going to be public?
So at this point, the data that's going into this data set for Next Gen 1 starts its life here with the addressing authorities. Once we have a solution for publicly distributing the data, then commercial vendors can access it, right? Then Google or whoever, Apple Maps, they can access this data set and use it with, but that depends on what kind of restrictions. I'm not a lawyer, I don't know about that kind of stuff, but ideally, they would be consuming that data and then be utilizing it in their